we need to be hiring for different types of things. Now, that doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater, and it doesn't matter if somebody has never trained in accounting. Yes, you still need to have that type of skill set, right? But we are going to need to be thinking about what is going to change about that job and where can we in our own organization ask someone to innovate in that job? How can they use AI to do their job better, to open up space for them to think differently, solve differently, create a new tool, or have a new perspective that drives us forward as an organization?
Hi, and welcome to the show. I'm Johnny Campbell, CEO and co-founder of SocialTalent. And this week on the podcast, we're talking to Natasha Nuytten, who's joining us from Omaha, Nebraska. And Natasha is the co-founder and CEO of a fantastic AI-powered recruiting technology company called Clara. And I'm going to be talking to Natasha today about how AI is changing recruiting, what she's doing to make that change, and where we might go in the future. Natasha, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. So glad you could join us. Wonder if wouldn't mind introducing yourself to our guests and telling us a little bit about what brought you here.
Absolutely. I am very happy to be here. A, because I always love the conversations that I listen in on that you've had with others. And so I'm excited about that. And B, I am a little bit jealous that I wasn't in Barcelona when you all were just there because it's one of my favorite places. And I thought, damn, I really missed out. So I'm happy to be here. As you said, I am the CEO of at Clara, and I have zigged and zagged my whole life. I was never one of those who was gonna follow any sort of straight path to get anywhere. And so how I got here is by way of 15 years of mentoring and family work and grassroots community organizing, e-commerce, aesthetics, adult education, product creation and distribution, table tennis, and digital transformation. So I've been all over the place, but I am very glad that the path has led here. So thank you for having me.
I'm going to put a pin in table tennis and come back to it at the end if you don't mind, because that really intrigues
Happy
me.
to.
So, Natasha, everybody's talking about AI. Either
Mhm.
they're massive advocates talking about how it's going to transform recruiting, or they're terrified and they're in fear of it and they're panicking and wondering what they'll do with it. Tell me about your view on AI and hiring. What are some of the opportunities that you think it presents? What are some of
Mm,
the categories out there you find interesting? And what are some of maybe the potential risks or downsides that people should genuinely be nervous about, if there's any? Give me your
yeah.
overview of AI and hiring where we are today.
Yeah, well, 2 things that you said that I really resonate with. One, it is an opportunity. I see challenges as opportunities personally, and I think that especially talent acquisition and recruiting right now, um, it's we've needed to make some changes for a very long time, and I think folks in it know that. And so I think this is our chance to really rethink some things. That's A. B, I think the, enthusiasm and the fear, I think a healthy combination of both is really wise, because the reality is, like, AI is here, it's going to change pretty much everything, and we have an opportunity to take control of that, and do things the way that we really want to do them, and so I look at it as like, yeah, it's a little bit scary. Things are gonna change. There's a lot we don't know 6 months from now. My job is different today than it was 3 months ago, right? Everybody's job is gonna be different in 5 months. So, there's a reality of that, and if we can really be thinking forward about what it takes to be sort of future ready in our organizations, I mean, what a massive opportunity to do things that are better for people, which ultimately is better for our organizations and our companies. So, sort of high level, like, that's it. I think we have an opportunity to dig in and do some things differently. Um,
And let
from
me
a
take them.
technology. Yeah,
Well,
please.
do you mind me digging into your first point, right? That
Please, please.
there's probably opportunities to change things that we wanted to change.
Mhm.
What needs to change? Why does it need to change?
Ugh. Listen, controversial, not controversial, you tell me what you think, but I think resumes are total bullshit, and we need to be thinking differently about how we hire talent and why we bring people into our organizations. And the bigger picture is that we probably need to rethink structure entirely, right? Around companies, and rather than hiring for specific roles, hiring for abilities and capabilities. So that's like an entirely different conversation, I think. But what I think could change is that we can start right now to do that work. We can start thinking differently about what are we looking for? We need to stop with this keyword business. Everybody knows that. We need to start moving towards like an actual skills-based hiring. But the next step of that is, what are people's abilities? What can they learn? What are they able to do? And resumes just don't tell us that, right? They tell us what the last person hired me to do because they needed it done in their organization. It doesn't even say what I'm capable of doing. Um, so I think that's one. I think two, when we think about the opportunities that we have the opportunity to move more intelligently through and equitably through the process, right? If we can systematize some of these things, we can help get our own selves out of our way as we're hiring talent, by doing the things that we've been doing with our phones, for instance. Like, I can still remember my phone number from growing up, but it took me 3 years to remember my husband's phone number. It's like, we can offload some of those things that we don't need to use our these 3-pound, caloric monsters in our head for, and instead, we can put that to use on doing the things that we haven't even yet given our space to think about doing from a talent perspective, development and organizationally. So, I think technology right now, the opportunity for us to sort of take a step back. I would love to just blow it up and start over, but I know the rest of the world is not that prepared to step into that mess with me. But the reality is, like, I do think we have an opportunity to sort of look at each step of the puzzle, each step of the path, and say, okay, we can do better here, we can do better here, we can do better here. And right now, we are building those technologies at such an incredible rate that we can do that. We actually have the opportunity to do it, to iterate, to get it right really quickly and really efficiently.
I love that. We had Giorgio from Sephora join us in the podcast
Mm.
a week or so ago, and he was sharing with us that, yeah, previously he was in H&M and they brought in a kind of AI powered way of hiring for retail associates that was able to demonstrably reduce attrition by about 50%, right? Faster and better and all that kind of stuff. But, as a proxy for quality, they were able to get folks who wanted to be there more than the traditional way, right? And he talked about in Sephora how they're trying to build something similar and focused on, very much to your point, around capabilities. For me, they realized that there isn't a particular skill you need to be a beauty associate in Sephora stores. You need to have this passion and interest and capability, um, to basically, a desire to and want to basically help somebody in this area and have this passion. And their view is we can teach you all the other skills. And they're very good at it, but you have to have this innate desire. And they're going to looking to scale there, I think, 30, 40,000 hiring a year through AI to get similar results that you see in organizations like H&M, or we've heard about McDonald's or 7-Eleven or DHL, or lots of these other organizations who are sharing these case studies of AI. So I do agree with you. I think there's a world where, the CV doesn't matter. Big organizations are doing hundreds of thousands of hires or millions of hires a year now without a resume. I have a 16-year-old son. I have four sons, but my 16-year-old, my wife instructed me to help him write his resume over the weekend. I was torn because I, like you, go, "Oh, it's a waste of time." But I also recognize that it is the broken system we're in, that you'll probably need this to get into a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
There are increasing amount of companies where, and I explained to my son, I said, you will not have to produce a resume. You'll just have to log on and they'll do an assessment and give you a job or not give you a job at the end. And that's it. That's the leveler. Not what qualifications you got, not whether you did your exams, not whether you read those books. They'll test what they need to know about you and tell you if you're good for the job. It'll probably be very accurate. And that's a world we're moving into, very much for what we've called standing up or blue collar roles for sure. Maybe less on the professional side, right? And I hate using that word professional, like every other job is not professional. But let's call it, let me rephrase. Natasha, because I heard this 2 weeks ago. I really like this. There's jobs where you shower before you go to work, and there's jobs where you shower after you come home from work. And I like that
Yeah,
differentiation. We're not trying to make a judgment. It's just, do you shower going to work or coming back from work, right?
yeah.
So the jobs where you shower coming home from work seem to be moving much faster towards AI and automation. The jobs where you shower before you go to work, less so. Talk to me about what you've seen in that space. Like, is there still room for, okay, on one side you have, McDonald's and 7-Eleven and H&M hiring based on an assessment online without a resume. But the other roles where it's like, I need an accountant, I need a lawyer, I need somebody who has trained and studied to be a surgeon. I need someone who's a specialist. I need somebody who has certifications. You know, how can AI help in that world? Is that world at the moment just not going to be serviced by AI, or what are your thoughts in that kind of market?
That's really interesting, and I love the showering before and after. I've had both in my life, types of jobs, and I appreciate both. Um, I do think there's a real miss because I think that because we think of those types of work differently, um, and they are different, so there's, no judgment there, but because we think about the people doing that work differently, we have, in the one hand, seen folks move really quickly to being able to automate because I think we think we understand this shower after you work differently. Like, we think it's less complex, etcetera, and the reality is the work where, you shower before you go to work, there are a lot of things where technology's actually gonna change those jobs more than it's gonna change the shower after you come home from work jobs, and so what we need to be hiring for and what I'm seeing in the Executive Leadership Council here in the US just did a voice of the member survey in which they were talking about the things that are on people's minds as far as leadership and sort of those shower after work or before work kinds of roles. And what was really interesting to me is something we've been talking about and preaching about for a couple of years now, which is yes, there are some certain abilities, skills we need people to be able to do. But because those roles are changing and they're going to change faster than we even know, we need to be hiring for learning agility. Can I apply old information in a new situation? Can I take in new information and apply it to things I thought I knew? We need to be hiring for critical thinking. Can this person take in seemingly disparate things and find their way? Can they think for themselves and problem solve? We need to be looking for folks who can pivot and be resourceful and proactive and resilient, right? The wind coming out of the west isn't going to screw up their entire day. Like, we need to be hiring for different types of things. Now, that doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater, and it doesn't matter if somebody has never trained in accounting. Yes, you still need to have that type of skill set, right? But we are going to need to be thinking about what is going to change about that job and where can we in our own organization ask someone to innovate in that job? How can they use AI to do their job better, to open up space for them to think differently, solve differently, create a new tool, or have a new perspective that drives us forward as an organization? So, by hiring for these things that we would call, sort of future ready abilities and skills, we're creating a workforce on that backside that is more prepared to use AI, has more space to do it, and does it in such a way that it is to the benefit of them and to the company by being able to use that creativity, to solve problems differently than we've even looked at them to date.
Natasha, you mentioned Barcelona. We had some podcast broadcasts recently from Barcelona where we had
Mhm.
25 leaders together to talk about some of these issues. One of the themes that came out of that amongst these leaders of very large organizations running talent acquisition and talent was that a lot of them, if not most of them, seem to be moving away from the world of assessing for hard skills, because their view was, I think shared by you, that these behaviors, competencies, ways of thinking, mindsets were much more important. I actually had a lunch yesterday with an entrepreneur who really impressed me. He was fabulous and amazing thinker. who was talking about this AI first mindset. He's somebody my age, right? So he's not like, 22 years of age or 16 years of age coming out with AI. And he talked about, you know, the generation of workers coming into the workforce soon. There will be AI natives. They will be, we talked about digital natives a few years ago, but these are AI natives. They just start with AI because why wouldn't they do anything else? And that's great. But there's everyone else in the workforce today, and we're increasingly seeing that many jobs, many of those, call them office jobs or corporate jobs, that kind of share before you work, go to work type jobs, you're going to need AI. And he was talking about engineering to me, engineering roles, and sharing that he wants AI first engineers. And he described an AI first engineer doesn't really code. They don't really write code because they're going, why would I code? Just like why would somebody who writes articles write every word in an AI world? That's crazy. They might shape, prompt, get to the end point, but they're not writing word for word an essay. That just seems like a crazy idea if you're AI first. But a coder will ask the AI to write the code. They'll describe the need, the outcome, they'll architect it in their brain. Um, and they'll get the AI to write the code. And if the code's wrong, they'll just ask AI later on to fix the code. Like, they don't even need to know it needs to be fixed until they need to know, and then AI will fix it because AI works 100 times faster, never sleeps, et cetera, et cetera. And we talked about finding someone who's typically, I hate to say this, but younger, who's maybe AI first, is one way of solving the problem. But how do you find folks in the market today who have the ability to be AI native? And that, I think, speaks to your points around,
Mm.
you have a learning agility, you're flexible, you're willing to change your perspective, you're willing to embrace new things. And they are, I'd agree, more important things to assess for if someone's not AI native because they're just young and they grew up with this stuff, but they're in the workforce today and they have to change their ways because it's really hard to change their ways. And I might use that as a launching pad, Natasha, for you maybe at this point because you haven't yet, and thank you, but you haven't explained what Clara does. So maybe would now be a good time for Clara, bring Clara to life for me. So what is the problem you're solving, and what makes you different?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you asking. Um, so we help teams hire smarter, faster, for future ready roles, right? For future ready organizations, and we do it in a more equitable way. So, to your point around how are how are we looking for that type of talent, whether it's we're making assumptions to your point around someone who's young being more of an AI first native, right? Versus someone who is 55. The reality is like we have 5 generations of workers in the workforce right now. That's the first time in history that that's happened. And in the US, by the year 2030, 55% of the working population is going to be over the age of 55, right? So not only do we have this other sort of talent shortage that we're talking about, we're having this massive shift in the way that people think. So when we think about how we're solving for helping leaders who are looking to develop more dynamic organizations and to make hires that are future facing, we do that by looking for some of these abilities. We have a proprietary assessment that we've built out. It's really simple, that looks at critical thinking, learning agility, what we call distance traveled, which is not so much what you've been through in your life, but what you've learned from what you've been through in your life. Those things like resourcefulness, self efficacy, anti fragility, those types of things. And the reason why we believe that those are important is A, the history and the research shows that those things matter in sort of predicting success. Um, but more importantly, when we can look at that constellation of skills, we find folks who can be that type of learner who, to your point, can learn to use these tools that are coming at them, can adapt in their role, they can contribute to their team and the success of how they fit into this sort of group of folks. And I wouldn't even say fit. I would say how they can add value to that team that they're on, and what they can bring. And so I think it can be really challenging to think about. I think especially as recruiters and talent acquisition people, um, we know that there are human things that we do that technology can't yet do and
Uh,
shouldn't yet do. I want to be really clear about that. So it's important for us to keep the human in the loop, but it's also really important that we think about the fact that as our needs change, as we become less and less sure of what we need, we are by nature, as human beings, going to default to what we know. Our brains are going to try to find the path of least resistance. They are gonna wanna look for folks who have historically in the past proven to be super successful in our organization, but what we're hiring for in the future is not what we've needed in the past. And so we need to be thinking about how do we mitigate bias in that process? How do we use tools that help us think differently about the folks who are sitting in front of us who we're trying to consider bringing into our organization? Um, and so we do that really simply. We engage with the candidates. We provide them some opportunity to give more insights about their skills and abilities. We do that. They have a great experience. They feel like they're able to actually talk about themselves in a more thoughtful and in specific way. Um, Ask some questions specific to the role, and then we ask about these real world scenarios where folks can respond to, "This is how I would solve this." None of the answers are wrong, but it does give us an indicator if somebody has a particular strength in resourcefulness, or if we're going to see proactivity sort of shine coming out of this person. Different than personality assessments, right? Those are slightly more emotions based. They might be a little bit more interactive or relational. And actually, they're very difficult for folks, a lot of neurodivergent folks to take because it feels like so ambiguous, right? So, really just drilling it down to ability. And the beauty of these things is that we also know they're teachable. So it is learnable. If
Mm.
you need to, we can do that by creating stronger learning cultures in our organization, by looking at, we provide a little bit of feedback that says, hey, this person would benefit and be able to develop this skill by being in an environment in which they ABC. So giving some insights right out of the gate as we're looking at talent, like, okay, this person's coming in with really high critical thinking skills and a lot of grit and a lot of resourcefulness. We wanna move them on the learning agility from sort of medium to high. Here are 3 things that we can do, and they have this other skill set. Great. This is a win for us. This is the type of person we need to be able to add to our team. So,
And
that's how we're
Natasha,
looking at those
like,
skills. Yeah,
so if you look at, I've lots of questions, as you can
please.
imagine, but if I've got three different roles, right? A driver, a head of sales, and a general operative, a manufacturing operative. You know, do you have the exact same recommendation? You assess somebody, and as you said, there's no right or wrong answer, but how do you decide, how much learning agility is required for each of those three roles? What's the balance? What's the benchmark? Like, does your system also guide that, or are you relying on the employer to predefine what their need is in advance?
Yeah, so right now, when we look at those types of abilities, they are, we selected them because they're fairly universal, across globally, as well as across different types of work, which is specifically why we selected them. Um, Whether or not someone needs to have a lot of something as a driver, we're not measuring or telling you for that this you should have more of this in this particular role. Reason being that every role is a little bit different. For instance, I know a lot of folks in transportation logistics, and a driver in one company where they don't have a lot of digital technology in their trucks. They are very sort of old school. It's all locally done. There's a lot less need for someone to have sort of forward thinking digital experience and thinking. And so the learning agility in that role for that company doesn't need to be as high. Whereas is someone who is working for a very forward sort of trucking company who has drivers in trucks that are they're exploring, like, self-driving technologies, right? And they're in that role. They need to have a very different set. So, on paper, those 2 roles are the same thing. So, we're not saying, "Hey, you need more of this or less of this." We're just telling you how much is there of those things, and then we put it back in the hands of the team because the reality is, like, even if I'm hiring for a graphic designer and I'm hiring for 2 of them in the same organization and on the same team, based on who else is on my team, I need more or less of some of those things, right? Just for any individual hire. So maybe I just lost everyone on my team with seniority, and all of a sudden I have this really young team, and I need folks who can come in with a little more experience, but also who are maybe really great at critical thinking, right? So we're just putting the data back out to the teams and letting them, based on the role and the needs of the hiring manager, be able to make those adjustments. Now, I will say one thing that I really love about what we do, and one thing our partners appreciate, is we all know that needs change. And we all have worked with hiring managers who say, "Hey, I want A, B, and C." And then turns out actually what I meant was X, Y, and Z, right? So one of the challenges is, how do you reshuffle all of those people you've already looked at in an equitable way, so that you're not leaving anyone out, and you're not only focusing on, okay, who of the last 10 that I've looked at now meets these new requirements. So we enable you to shuffle all of that with all of that additional information, so that you're really looking at the entire pool of candidates and applicants who have come into that space, for that role, so that if something changes, we're really being thoughtful about making sure that we're finding all of the needles in the haystack versus just that one.
Natasha, what are some of the outcomes customers of Clara are seeing, or what are they coming to you to solve in the first
Mm.
place?
Yeah, so wanting to solve for speed and efficiency, right? As you said, we're all trying to do more with less because the economy is the economy is demanding it, and so are the bosses and the bottom lines, right? So doing more with less efficiency. Two, wanting to be in organizations where they can thoughtfully embed equity in a very legally defensible way. Right, because especially in this country, now it's different, in other countries, it's not quite such a shit show of a conversation, but in the United States, at least, there is a lot of, "Okay, we have all these new executive orders, and I have no idea what laws are really actually changing, it's all very complicated. How can we drive better candidate experience while embedding equity in a really thoughtful way?" So, efficiency, embedding equity, and then really looking at these future forward, future ready skills. Those are the folks that we're working with, that care about those 3 things and wanna create some thoughtfulness in that part of their process.
I imagine most hiring teams are looking for those kind of benefits, but what do you find is the sweet spot type customer? Like, what kind of customers are most coming to you that you think the most obvious use case is for, or where you've seen the most traction so far?
Yeah. So I would say 2 things, 2 folks. One, small teams who are doing a lot. So maybe they're a team of 2 or 3 or 4, and they're really trying to figure out, I can't, my knowledge as a human resource, I'm more of a generalist, right?
Right.
Because I'm a team of 2. I have to be able to do everything. How do I really get good at screening and talent acquisition? Those folks. And then on the other end of that spectrum, uh, we're working now and seeing a lot of traction with, larger companies where they're remotely distributed and have some of these very high volume roles that they are hiring multiples of. And so they're looking for specific types of folks. So those are the 2 people that we're working with right now. I think really interestingly for us, and something that I'm super excited about, is we have a lot of interest coming to us from recruiters, and executive search firms who are sort of global, thinking about, what can we be looking for and understanding that differentiates us from our competition, and how do we go about applying this in a meaningful way in those scenarios? So, we've actually got a number of partners, 3, I'm hoping we've got 1 more at the table, I'm hoping we're gonna get a 4th here, who all have different areas of expertise, who are working with us on that sort of sourcing and additional layering of assessment around those things. So, I it's sticky as far as the, "Oh, there's a there there," as my friend Robert would say, but and solving for that. So, but today, I need to work faster. We're a small team. I need to be more efficient. And hey, we have these high volume roles and we're hiring multiples of them. How do we find and bubble up the best talent rather than filtering out and just finding the 3 folks who are the most obvious choices?
Love it. So, like, for today, when we're kind of looking at, to your original point, removing the resume and the need for that, looking more at the drivers of real success in a role rather than, let's say, the education you have or the company you worked for, the job title you held, or the job description. that was in your last post, as you mentioned earlier, Natasha. So that's what today looks like. And, we're early there. A lot of companies still not thinking this way, not doing this. Where does it go from here? Like when you think about your roadmap, or you think about the AI hiring roadmap over the next 3 to 5 years, what
Mhm.
else, if not, I won't ask you to predict anything, but what are some of the exciting ideas you're thinking about exploring or watching others do?
Yeah. Oh, so many. Um, I think there are a couple that I'll double click on. One in particular is, obviously we've got this whole notion of agentic AI. And being able to use agents to do some of this work. And that's really exciting because it helps teams, even like us, right, who are servicing other teams, be able to move more quickly and build products that are solving even more efficiently than we thought they were before. So that's definitely something that we're looking at and layering into the tool that we have. Because what it does is it allows us to take the work that we're already doing and build upon. Right, to the point around that sourcing conversation, which is certainly on our roadmap, is how do we mine the reservoirs of folks with whom we've already spoken to, and or have wanted to, and we don't know the relevancy of their information anymore, or it was 3 years ago that we talked to them, but we watched their career from afar, right? Like, that type of how do we reengage those candidates who we already know wanna work with us? That's one I think is really interesting in the re-engagement space. 2, I think sourcing is gonna change, and it is already, right? There are a lot of great companies out there doing sourcing and enabling teams to be able to do some things. But I think it's going to change because the technology is going to get a little bit. There's going to be two paths. There's one that's going to get more specific, right, and it's going to be more. This is exactly the person I want to hire. I want to hire Natasha. Where is the next one of her? I think that's one path. What really excites me though is looking at the other, which is, hey, this person has worked in our world before. However, what are we missing? Right? Like, how do we not default to what we know? So, for instance, I think right now a lot of AI and tools are talking about, "Hey, we do AI search, whatever." Well, they're doing a lot of keywords and they're just stringing together like really robust Boolean searches and they're pretending that that's something new. It's not. The second layer of that is looking at like synonyms, right? Hey, hi, hello. They all mean the same thing, but they're slightly different or adjacent to each other. What we're doing, which is really exciting to me, and I'm excited about not only where we sit, but next levels of this, is we're looking at skill equivalencies, right? So, like baking soda. If I'm out of baking soda, I can Google that and find out that I can use club soda, I can use whipped egg whites, and I can use 3 times the baking powder, and I can still get the same output. But on paper, those look like very, very different inputs, right? So when we think about those sort of future ready workforces and we're thinking about skills and abilities, what other things can we be taking into account that mean that someone can do this job? And so we need to
Yeah.
be thinking differently about that. So um, I tie that back to the fact that I do think the whole resume situation is going to be different because um, I'm very excited about the fact that when we create a profile for someone, yes, you can look at what they've done before because it's not irrelevant. I'm not trying to say that it doesn't matter, just saying it doesn't matter as much as we have given it
Mm.
credence, to have, and it doesn't carry the weight that it maybe once did because, I mean, think about it, we have in this day and age, especially as young people are moving into the workforce, and then we think about those older folks who have had 7 careers before they've gotten into the role that they've been in. What do they know from being in those experiences that isn't necessarily on that resume that is value add to our organization, right? Or you think about somebody who just left the workforce and when we looked at our um when we were building out our assessment, we did some research around the folks who participated in the study. And people who were re-entering the workforce after, for instance, caretaking, they were living on their growth edge, learning all kinds of new skills in that last year and a half, right, before. And so on paper, it looks like they've been out of the industry and they've been distant and so much has changed. And how are they possibly going to keep up? And the reality is like they just learned an entirely new skill set that is really valuable, right? And not all of it is necessarily transferable, but the ability to learn and the ability to work at their growth edge and the ability to connect dots between seemingly disparate things, that's a real value add. So that should be, we should be giving them bonus points for the fact that they've been learning while they've been out versus dinging them and thinking that they shouldn't be there. So things that I'm excited about, I think we are gonna blow up the resume. We're gonna find a totally different way of looking at things. I think that we are going to be able to use language, and AI algorithms to think not just about existing skill, but about ability. I'm really excited about that. And then I think being able to use agents to help augment our teams and do the things that we didn't even know technology could do so that we can now figure out the things that nobody's even yet thought of, right? What an amazing opportunity for us to be creative and to solve differently in talent. I'm super excited about
I
that.
love that. At the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, no one would have predicted the world we have today and what we did when
That's
we
right.
freed ourselves from the time we were spending in factories doing
That's right.
some of that really, really kind of dirty work, which it was in factories in the 1800s and the beginning of that age. So,
Mhm.
Natasha, I share with you your optimism about the future. I love what you've built. I love the approach you've taken, different to a lot of the kind of stack ranking tools that are merely looking at keywords and resumes and telling you which of these candidates based on the keywords are the top A, B, C, D players. We're taking a very different approach in terms of what are the abilities of these folks, based on assessments that have robustness to them, that tell you much more than the words on a page, but tell you how somebody can operate, how they can work, how they can learn, how they can do things, how they can think, which I think a lot more employers are looking into. Natasha, if anyone listening is keen to know more about Clara, to get a demo, to see what integrations you offer into their suites of ATSs, CRMs, HRIS systems, any of these different things. What's the best way to reach out to you? And who do you recommend reaches out to you?
Yeah, so I would say reach out if you are interested in moving faster and smarter. If you're a data first organization that wants to have validated insights as they're making hiring decisions, and if you care about equity in your process and you want to embed that sort of a rising tide and all ships sort of situation, if you're one of those folks, I would love to hear from you. And if you're not and you just want to tell me I'm wrong, I'd want to hear from you too because let's have a great conversation. But if you're one of those folks, we know we can help you. Um, the way that you can reach me on LinkedIn, there are not a lot of Newtons on LinkedIn that spell it the way I spell it. So feel free to reach out to me there. And also, you can find us. Our website is getclara.io, and there's some information and resources around how we think about those tools and those constructs as well. So if you want to learn a little on your own, or see we don't cost a lot, so if you wanna see the impact of, what the ROI can be in your organization, there's a calculator there too, so you can get some information without having to feel like you're being sold. I'm not a great salesperson, Johnny, I'll tell you that right now, so if someone reaches out to me, it's just gonna be a regular old conversation, so
So you don't cost a lot now, Natasha, but I think we're going to see the price of Clara go up as it probably reaches the point that it's the right level of price as more folks get in touch. So get in early is my
That's right.
recommendation.
That's right.
I love what you and the team are doing. I think it's a really smart, different offering to what we're seeing out there. And I know a lot of folks who are on the market for new tools to kind of to bulk assess candidates. This is a different way that it brings probably more candidates into the fray rather than takes them out, because you're finding skills, ability, sorry, more abilities and behaviors that aren't being assessed by other tools. So love what you're doing. Keep flying that flag, Natasha. Looking to see how this develops. Maybe you're back in 2 years. I won't even get you on the show. It'll be some corporate VP person you send to do the interview as
No
you're
way.
as you're killing it. I hope you're killing it because you're just solving so many problems for so many different customers.
No, this is I love having conversations with folks like you who are, very thoughtful and intentional about how you think about talent acquisition and recruiting, but also the technology and the opportunities. So I love listening. I will come back anytime, and I will meet you anywhere should we decide to do something together. But
Next
thank you very
Barcelona,
much.
the next Barcelona, Natasha.
Yes, yes, I'm in.
And thank you, listener, for
All right.
joining us and hearing Natasha's story. You're going to reach out to her. Don't forget, it's getclara.io. You can find Natasha Nuytten, that's Nuytten, on LinkedIn. You got any direct messages. We hope you join us next week. We've got another great guest. And don't forget our back catalog, which you can find on Spotify, Apple, wherever you find your podcasts, or you can find us on YouTube or LinkedIn as well. Until next week, take care. Talk to you soon.